Welcome back to the West Ham Voice. I don't know about you, but trying to keep up with West Ham's transfer rumours over the last week or so has been pretty interesting. Every time you click on a social media page related to West Ham, there's another name linked with the club. 1 minute it's Gustavo Sa, Ruben, Vargas, Dwight, McNeil, James McAtee, Simon Adingra. Now, don't get me wrong. The transfer season does give me the feeling that things are progressing and hopefully in the right direction. But it's exciting as it is frustrating. I'm sure you will all agree. 1 minute you're convinced that we're about to sign the next world beater. The next minute he's apparently agreed terms with another club. But today, I don't really want to discuss whether these rumours are true or not, because if we're honest, none of us now really know. With a crackdown in leaks coming out of the club, the journalists, the ITKs, only really get their information mainly from one kind of source, and that is usually player agents. And more often than not, the agents want to create an environment where it looks as if their players are in high demand, because that's what pushes up their prices, and that's what eventually gets a player sold. Agents have got their own agendas. The club in the past have leaked information when it suits them. So rather than asking, is this rumor true or not, I think there are two more interesting questions to be asking. The first is, does a player that's actually linked to us look like a Nils Koppen signing now that Nils Koppen is in place? Because we seem to have a system in place. We've appointed someone whose entire job is to recruit players. And the reason why this feels so different to previous incumbents in that role, such as Steiden, Macaulay, etc., is that David Sullivan is no longer in the picture. No longer there to override any recommendations or to override any decisions that Koppen is likely to make. Now, the second question I think is worth asking is, would these players actually help West Ham get promoted back into the Premier League at first time of asking? Now, that's a huge difference between signing a player who may be brilliant in the next 2 or 3 years and signing a player who's going to be brilliant for the next 9 months. And that's not always the same thing, is it? And that's why I want to introduce something a little bit different on the channel today. Now, throughout this video, I'm going to talk about 5 players, and every player is going to receive 2 ratings. The first will be a Koppen scale rating, simply asking the question, how much does this player fit into the type of footballer Nils Koppen has built his reputation on signing? Then we'll have the promotion scale, because if the objective, obviously it should be, is to get West Ham straight back into the Premier League, we actually have to give us a good chance of doing that by signing the type of players who will deliver in the Championship in the forthcoming season. Now, at the end of this video, I'm going to show you a graph of all the ratings I've given to the players to help you make up your own minds as to who may be best, which players may be the best kind of signings to go for in this transfer window. But before I do all that, if you're new to the channel, or if you've watched the West Ham Voice before, but yet to become a subscriber, a QR code has appeared in that top corner there. All you've got to do is click on that, takes you to the subscription page. Subscription is free of charge. Why not subscribe to the channel if you enjoy the content? So let's spend a couple of minutes talking about Nils Koppen himself, because that's quite important. When it comes to West Ham United, Nils Koppen is going to have a huge say in how we do our transfer business in the future. Because if we understand his recruitment philosophy, it's key to understanding how the Koppen ratings are going to work. You look at the clubs that he's worked at throughout his career, there's a pattern. He's not built his reputation on signing players who are superstar names. He's built his reputation on identifying tomorrow's stars before anyone else does. So players with a high technical ability, players who are comfortable in possession, players who are excellent with their underlying data, and footballers who primarily are between the ages of 19 and 23. Players who are going to have a massive room for improvement, and most importantly, players whose values are likely to increase over time. Won't always work, but that's his philosophy. You think about it from the club's perspective. Would you rather keep spending 30, 40 million pounds on a 27, 28-year-old who's already at his peak? And how many times have we done that in the past? Or would you spend 17, 18 million pounds on a 21-year-old who might be worth 40, 50, 60 million pounds in the next 2 or 3 years? That's the modern football recruitment philosophy that a lot of teams have adopted. It's not just about buying good players, it's about buying assets. Let's be honest, and that's what they are. Players are assets. Players who will improve you today, but who will strengthen the club's finances tomorrow. And that's why I think the likes of Gustavo Sa has attracted so much attention. I'll come on to him in a moment. But here's where Nuno comes into the conversation, because whilst Koppen is probably thinking about the next 2, 3, 4 years, Nuno is thinking about the season ahead. Now, one objective, one goal, and it's pretty obvious as to what that is: get promotion. Get promotion now, and worry about tomorrow later. And managers don't always have the luxury, do they, of thinking long term. Sometimes they need players who can win football matches immediately, players who've experienced pressure, players who understand English football, and players who don't need 6 months to bed in. And that's why I don't actually think these two approaches compete with each other. I think they actually complement each other. The very best recruitment departments won't ignore what the manager needs, and the very best managers won't ignore the recommendations put to them by the recruitment department. They need to meet somewhere in the middle, which brings me to what I think is going to be an interesting part of today's show. We're going to ask the simple questions. Do they satisfy what Nils Koppen has been brought in to do at West Ham United? And at the same time, do they satisfy what Nuno needs to get promotion at first time of asking? Now, if we can identify players who score highly on both scales, then maybe, just maybe, we're getting a glimpse of what the future of West Ham's recruitment really is going to look like. So let's start with a player who, in my opinion, is kind of a benchmark, the kind of Nils Koppen signing, a typical signing that he'd go for, and that is Gustavo Sa. Now, if you watched the channel over the last few days, I've spoken quite a bit about Sa, his strengths, his abilities, and when I think about the type of player Nils Koppen has built his reputation on identifying, I immediately think of someone like Gustavo Sa, 21 years of age, technically gifted, creative, works hard, still improving, and most importantly, the fact that he's not anywhere near the finished article now means that he's going to be worth the value that we're paying for now, 17, 18 million. But in the next 2 or 3 years, he could reach his ceiling and become a 50, 60 million pound player. So I think he's the sort of player that Nils Koppen is almost definitely going to recommend to Nuno. Now, I'm giving Sa a rating, a Koppen rating of something like 95%, pretty high. I don't think you could build a much better profile for what I imagine Koppen wants at West Ham. But when it comes to Gustavo Sa and what he can contribute for promotion, then his rating is slightly lower at about 70%. Now, let me explain. It's not because I don't rate him, quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. I think he's got the talent to become an outstanding footballer. But if your only objective is about championship football and worry about the future later, then you're going to look for experience over prospect in the coming months. And that's why, because he doesn't have the experience of the championship, his rating goes down slightly. Anyone who's watched championship football knows it isn't about having the most talented footballers. I think Sa will definitely contribute, but I think he'll produce moments of quality, no doubt about that, but he's still adapting. And that's perfectly normal for a player coming in from another league abroad. So my verdict, if West Ham sign Gustavo Sa, I think I'd be convinced we're looking at a player that's going to be for the future. I'd be excited by that, but I wouldn't necessarily think he's going to guarantee promotion. I think he'll contribute, and there's nothing wrong with that. But let's not forget also that he's a player that's going to be learning in the championship. Now, look, let's also not forget Rui Pedro Silva, the new assistant head coach to Nuno, will have made his recommendation about Sa as well, because he was the one at Famalicão who gave him his senior debut at the age of 17. Right, let's move on to someone who's completely the opposite end of the spectrum. And that is, well, not completely, but almost. That's Ruben Vargas. Now, congratulations to him. He scored the winning penalty against Colombia in the World Cup last night. He's a good footballer. He's quick. He's direct, versatile. He can play across the front line, and he works hard with the ball. Now, I can absolutely understand why a manager would want him. But hello again, Sushi. She's in the background. But does he look like the type of player that Nils Koppen would sign? I'm not so convinced. Now, when it comes to the Koppen factor, I'm going to give Ruben Vargas something like a 35% rating. Why? Sweetheart. Hang on. I'll let you out in a minute. Why? Because he's 27 years of age. He's much closer to his peak years. You're probably buying the finished version of Ruben Vargas now. His resale value is unlikely to increase dramatically. He's not the sort of player that a recruitment department will spend ages trying to uncover before anyone else notices him. That's why, from a Koppen point of view, he doesn't fit the pattern. Could it happen? Absolutely. But if it does, I suspect Nuno will have had a bigger say in the signing of this player, because managers love players who know that they know can come in and can contribute immediately. And that's exactly where the second score changes, because when it comes to the promotion scale, I'm going to give Vargas something like an 85%, because if your objective is about winning promotion, he's much closer to what you'd be looking for. Experienced, physically mature, knows the demands of top-level football. He'll be able to handle pressure. So that's incredibly valuable over a long championship campaign. Sometimes you need someone who's going to give you consistent 7 out of 10. Managers will love that. And for me, Vargas is that type of player. So it's not necessarily a Koppen signing, but certainly one that Nuno could certainly get behind. Now, let's talk about another player who might sort of divide opinion, and that's Dwight McNeil. By the way, with Vargas, there's a load of Premier League clubs who are interested in him. So let's think about that as well. Dwight McNeil. I've seen loads of supporters saying he's exactly what we need. Where do I stand? Well, it depends on what question you're asking. When it comes to the Koppen scale, I'm going to give Dwight McNeil 20%. Now, before anyone says that I don't rate him, that's not what I'm saying here. I'm simply asking, does this look like the sort of player that Nils Koppen will recruit? For me, no. 26 years of age, already established. He'll demand a high transfer fee. His wages are not likely to be cheap. And realistically, is his value going to double over the next couple of years by playing for West Ham? Probably not. That doesn't make him a bad player. It just makes him a very different type of investment to the sort of player that Nils Koppen would usually look to recommend. Now, when it comes to the promotion push, I'm going to give McNeil 90%. Why? Because if I was building a squad to get out of the championship straight away at first time of asking, I'd want a player who's already understanding English football, who's dealt with pressure, who gives you quality delivery, works tirelessly, understands the physical game, and perhaps most importantly, he'd arrive needing very little time to adapt. Now, would I spend a huge transfer fee on him? That I'm not so sure. If Everton were open to a loan deal, now we have now we have a completely different conversation, because suddenly you're bringing in a player who's got Premier League quality without having to make a long-term commitment for him. Now that's smart business. Dwight McNeil is probably the best example so far of why I've created these two scales. On the Koppen scale, very low. On the promotion scale, very high. Same footballer, two completely different ways of judging him. And it is probably the biggest challenge that's going to be facing West Ham this season, or this summer, should I say, is can we get players that fit the Koppen and the Nuno sort of demands? Now, if we can get a balance of that, then I think it gives West Ham a fantastic chance of getting straight back into the Premier League at first time of asking. Now, there are two more players I want to talk about, which are kind of even more intriguing than three I've already mentioned. Now, the others, one is an explosive winger who's tailor-made for modern recruitment. The other might just be the player who scores the highest across both scales. And these players could be the dream signings that will satisfy Koppen and Nuno in terms of what they're both looking for. Now, The first one is Simon Adingra. Bear with me. A player who will probably tick an awful lot of boxes. Young, explosive, athletic, capable of playing across the front line, comfortable in one-to-one situations, and most importantly, he's got something that every team needs: pace. Having players who can beat an opponent individually can completely change a game, because you will face teams who are, especially in the championship, who are going to sit deep, teams who are going to be difficult to break down. And sometimes you need someone who can create something from nothing, someone who can receive the ball and make defenders panic. Adingra kind of gives you that, but let's put him through the two tests. On the Koppen scale, Adingra gets an 80%. Young, huge upside, best years ahead of him. He's the type of player who you can imagine in a scenario where West Ham sign him, continue to develop him, and maybe in 2 or 3 years' time, clubs are looking at him in a different way. The only reason he doesn't score higher is because he's already kind of established. He's not quite the hidden gem. He's someone that the football world already knows about. But the profile, very much a Koppen profile. And when it comes to the promotion scale, again, I'm giving Adingra a high score, 78%, because there are things about Adingra that absolutely are perfect for a promotion push. I've said pace, direct running, ability to beat a man, ability to turn a game. And he's also got championship experience with Sunderland. Now, these are qualities that, will be crucial for someone, for a team that's going to go through a 46-game grueling season like West Ham are about to do. Now, Adingra is a really strong compromise signing. He's not just a player for the future. He could genuinely help you out in the here and now. He also fits the type of recruitment model that maybe West Ham are looking forward to in years ahead. The sort of signing where you could see both Nuno and Koppen sitting around the table and saying, this one makes sense. Now, the final player I'm going to talk about is James McAtee. Now, here's an interesting one. James McAtee might be the best kind of player that represents the middle ground, the sweet spot between what Nuno needs and what Koppen is looking for. The area where recruitment strategy and promotion ambition kind of come together. Everyone knows who James McAtee is, but that doesn't automatically mean he isn't a Koppen signing, because the one important factor here is he's still young, 23 years of age, entering a period where players often make the biggest improvements in their careers. And technically, he's exactly the sort of player modern footballing recruitment departments are looking for. Able to play in tight areas, creative, intelligent. He can unlock stubborn defenses, and that's something West Ham are going to need in the Championship. Now, when it comes to the Koppen scale, James McAtee gets 85%. Why not higher? Merely because he's established. He's already known. Ex-Man City player who comes with a premium. But the fundamentals are there. Young, technically gifted, high footballing intelligence, but still room to improve. Potential resale value could be extremely high. A player who could become significantly more valuable in the next 2 or 3 years. That's very much in line with the Koppen philosophy. And on the promotion scale, I'm giving James McAtee 92%. This is where I think he could be standout, because unlike some of the other younger talents, he's already experienced elite football. He's trained alongside top-level players. He's been coached in a possession-based system. He understands demands, and crucially, he has the creativity that promotion-winning teams often need. You need players that can unlock defenses. If you don't do that, you can lose points. McAtee feels like the type of player who can produce great moments, a goal out of nowhere, that set piece quality that can change a game. If West Ham can make this happen, especially if I think there was a possibility of a loan deal, this is the type of signing that would excite the fans, because it doesn't feel like you're choosing between the future and the present. You're getting both. You're getting a player who helps Nuno in the here and now, but also a player who fits the direction Koppen wants this club to go. And that's why James McAtee probably sits at the top of my current list. I know there are other players. I'll talk about them as they come along. But there is a thing about McAtee. With the arrival of Oliver Glasner, that might change the chances of whether McAtee stays at Nottingham Forest or whether he's available to go. But again, I think a loan deal could be in the offing. So what does this actually mean about West Ham's recruitment strategy? What are we going to see moving forward? Because these are different types of players that we're being linked to, but it kind of helps to sort of get a summary of what these players are about. So when it comes to the Koppen factor, like I've said, players like Sa, Adingra, McAtee fit the narrative. They would be the sort of players that I can see Nils Koppen recommending to West Ham. When it comes to Vargas and McNeil, probably a lower percentage rating there. But when it comes to the promotion push, you can see every single one of those players have got a high scoring. Even though Sa is at the lowest end of 70%, he still has the ability, I think, to make a significant contribution to this West Ham side to get promotion. Of course, really experienced players like McAtee and McNeil get a much higher rating. But overall, all these players, it's interesting because when you come to look at these players, what we might actually see at West Ham United in the upcoming season is that there's going to be a mix between the two. I've said it before that we need experience in this team. You can't just go out and buy every single 19 to 23-year-old player and think we're going to walk the championship. That's not how it works. We need experience, which is why I'm not dismissing the notion of players like McNeil coming to West Ham if we can get a deal for him. So there you go. That's my first version of the Koppen test. Tell me what you think. Which of these players do you think actually would make a significant contribution? Which of these players do you actually want us to sign if the rumors are true? The nearest one at this moment in time is Gustavo Sa, who I understand is here having his medical. But that's speculation until it's proven. And without any insider information, I couldn't tell you so. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to hit the like button. Please become a subscriber and hit the bell notification to let you know when I'm next on. And if you've enjoyed this video, also hit the hype button, which helps to promote this video on YouTube. Thanks for watching and listening. I'll see you all soon.